It's good. There's always a lot more action on a college campus today than maybe there was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because we have a lot more access to our players. In particular, this summer we're allowed each week to work them out for 4 hours. A year ago it would have been 2. You go back maybe 7, 8 years ago, you really had zero access other than strength and conditioning. So those are all, I think, rules that we really embrace, and I think building relationships and really trying to improve our players, that's more important, and we have the ability to do that right now at a higher level than we've used to. So we're at the beginning stages of that. Our pre-session, which is our first summer session, just is finishing up. Tomorrow will actually be the last day. So we've had Ira Lee and Dylan Smith here for these 3 weeks. They'll finish up, and then the new group will be coming in right after that. So from that perspective, and then academically, watching our guys finish the spring semester, some guys graduating, others returning eligible. There's a lot going on for sure.
Sean, you had to fill 2 coaching positions, obviously the most in a while. What were you kind of looking for in the men that you wanted, and or women, if you looked at any to fill those options?
Well, I think twofold. Obviously, great people, people that are very talented as basketball coaches, but also a group of people that complement each other. I think that when you build a cohesive unit or staff team, you have a lot of different ingredients. People that are talented in their own right, but complement each other. And the two that we brought back are on the younger side, which I think gives us the most stability that we can have. I think it's awesome when coaches leave your program to become head coaches, and we've had several do that. Each of them did an excellent job in their own right while they were here. But right now, I think the stability and the continuity, younger coaches that are going to build their track record here at Arizona and are here for multiple years. I think we have that with both Danny Peters and Justin Gainey. But first Danny was here really in a way that I think college sports is built to develop coaches, and that is he came here as a graduate manager after being a student athlete at Ohio State. He learned the University of Arizona. He learned the Pac-12 Conference. He learned what we do as a coaching staff, and he added value. He then went into our video position, which is a thankless job, but nonetheless I think develops your mind as a basketball coach quite a bit. And then he left, and he got some great experience. And to have him back now after that experience, he checks the box in both. Someone who's been at Arizona and understands the West and the Pac-12 and us, but also has the experience that you want to complement that. The second person who we've recently hired, Justin Gainey, I know I had a release on that last night, but Justin was a student athlete at NC State. I was an assistant coach. I watched him come in the door as a young freshman and leave as a graduating senior. And a lot of the qualities that he had as a player, I think you'll find that he has those same types of qualities as a coach. He's very selfless, hard worker. He was an overachiever as a player, and a lot of times those overachievers as players make great coaches. And he learned from somebody that I respect a great deal, Herb Sendek, in his last stop. So timing for him to come to Arizona, he's hungry, young, like Danny Peters, and I think that between Mark Phelps, who's been a head coach, who's got the most experience, combined with Danny and Justin, I like the group that we have.
What are some of the things you hope to accomplish both on the court and off of it during the summer months before you guys get set for the fall camp?
I think number one is just getting to know your players. We have quite a few new players. As you guys know, we've lost a good portion. I think the top 6 or 6 out of our top 7 aren't going to be with us. And a lot of the recruitments that we had this spring happened quickly. So I think the summer for both the players and us, it's a chance to become familiar with each other, for them to learn who we are, obviously learn the terminology and the way we do things, learn the university, learn what it feels like to live in Tucson. A lot of guys coming here for the first time. And by the time we get towards the end of August, it'll feel like we've been together for a long time. And I think that's number one.
Of the guys coming back, who do you anticipate taking leadership roles for this team?
Some of that remains to be seen. Most of the teams that we've had, the younger incoming talent is very, very important. And some of those guys came in the door ready to go, like a DeAndre, like Lowry. But most of the time, the success starts with the returners, that they improve from one year to the next. They're the most experienced. They lead in kind of create our culture for the young guys who have never been here before. And with the returners that we have, I think we have 6. Each of those guys in their own right has something to improve on over the summer. But I really believe that in each case, they have an opportunity to take a big step forward and be a different, much improved older player than they would have been a year earlier. That's happened here way more than we talk about, because there's so much made of who isn't here, who's the new recruiting class, who are those high school seniors or players that are eligible that we didn't have here a year ago that will be difference makers. But oftentimes, like I mentioned, it's those that have already been here that add to their game, that become better from their freshman to their sophomore year. And we have quite a few candidates to be able to do that.
So 2 years ago, you guys had a recruiting class that was thin in the spring, and people wondered were you going to be able to pull it off, and you pulled it off. This year, you had this year's troubles off the court or whatever, and were able to pull it off. How was that this year compared to maybe 2 years ago, where you were able to get the guys or get some guys?
Recruiting is different every year, and it's never the same from one family to the next. What worked and what was the most important decision-making factor for one of our incoming prospects 3 years ago might not be important at all to somebody that we're recruiting today. Recruiting classes are the same. I can make the case that the very first class that we recruited 10 years ago was the best class that's walked in here during my tenure. You can make that argument. You have Derek Williams, Solomon Hill, Kevin Parham, Carroll Nadiasco, Momo Jones when he was here for 2 years. Those guys, they came in and got the job done, and several of them are playing in the NBA. Every one of them left with their degree. But that happened as far out as sometimes June. I think Derek said he was coming in maybe the month of July. So it's hard to judge from one year to the next. This year, obviously, for a lot of obvious reasons, we did a lot of our work in the spring. But at the end of the day, every recruiting class is judged on how they perform once they're here. We've also had some of our most highly recruited classes, highly ranked classes, just be okay. Maybe there was one prospect out of that group that had an incredible career, and Nick Johnson comes to mind in his class. He was a first-team All-American, but the group that he came in with might not have been as strong as it appeared when we first signed them. So, I think in today's world where you're blending transfers, Chase Jeter, for example, I don't know what class he counts towards, but Chase is 2 years in at Duke, 3 years in now that he's practiced with us. He was a high school McDonald's All-American. We're counting on big things from him, both on the court and as a leader. And you can make the case that he might be as important as anybody on this upcoming team.
Can you talk about what went into the decision to give Jake a scholarship?
Yeah, Jake, he embodies all the qualities that we want to have as a culture, on and off the court. Somebody who cares a lot about his teammates and winning, who comes to work every day, so to speak, whether it be in practice, preparation for the upcoming team, in the weight room, off the court, off season. Obviously, when you're a walk-on and I say all those things about you and you're paying your own way, I think that says even more about the character of Jake. We've had so many great walk-ons impact us that very few times have we utilized all 13 of our scholarships. So being able to watch somebody earn it over a 2-year period, being selfless, working hard, and impacting both of the teams that he's been on, I think that's the right thing to do. And in the classroom, Jake's one of our strongest students. So he gets it done on the court, off the court. We trust him a great deal. And he's never asked for a scholarship. We gave him the scholarship because he earned it.
Is there anything for you left to do to build this team
as far as roster construction for this year?
I'm sorry, say it one more
Is
time.
there anything left to do to build this team this year for roster construction?
We have one more scholarship, and we could fill it. We might not, but there's a couple players that we have our eye on that potentially, they've already mentioned that they're going to transfer, and it's just a matter of whether that will be here or not. But I don't think that we have anybody that we're recruiting that would be eligible this year in the first semester.
Sean, what was your message to parents and to student athletes when you went back out on the recruiting trail regarding all the noise that was around this program last year?
My message hasn't really changed. There's ebbs and flows in sports. There's peaks and valleys. It's hard to judge college basketball on a season now. 27 wins, is that good? I don't know. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Winning a regular season conference championship, the value of that, you could make the argument that it's the most important thing that you can control. And it says a lot about the team that you have. But there's others that would say that means nothing. The conference tournament, we went a long time here where, we battled but pulled up short. And then recently, I think we've won 3 of the last 4 conference tournaments. And again, it all depends on who you are and what you want to write or talk about. That might mean nothing. Making the NCAA tournament is something that I think is easily taken for granted, but not everybody is able to do it year in and year out. And then obviously, everybody loves to have the success once you're in the tournament, and we're no different. The boundary of a Final Four, competing and having the opportunity to win a second national championship is something that we talk a lot about. But getting to a Sweet 16, that's an accomplishment that I think is very difficult to do, but there's others that would look at that as meaningless. The one that everybody counts is a Final Four and a national championship, and really that's what we haven't done. That's what we continue to build towards. And off the court, I think doing things correctly, making sure from an academic perspective that our players are moving towards graduation, are eligible, and that have success there, not just on the basketball court. And I think as long as that's the fabric of your program, there will always be those things that you can't control that pop up, and you have to fight through them, come out the other side. And I'll use Villanova as an example, that when Villanova had arguably 2 of their most highly rated recruiting classes a few years ago, it ended up translating into maybe 2 of their worst seasons under Jay Wright. And they learned from that. They tweaked things. They changed things. Some of the things they probably did even better and didn't change one thing. But I know this, that they came out on the other side bigger and stronger, built to win and last, more so than they ever would have if they didn't maybe go through those tough times. For us, coming through this period of time isn't always easy, but coming out on the other side built to be bigger, stronger, and better than ever, learning from things and growing our program, that's to answer your question. What you talk about, it's not all of a sudden just pressing a reset button and doing things completely different. There's a lot of things that we're very proud of that we don't want to change. There are some things that I think we have to improve on, and that's obviously the job of the leadership and me being at the top of that.
Have you gone back and looked at how the season ended up?
I have.
A few times. What have you thought?
I think the totality of our season, beginning in the fall and really getting through the Pac-12 tournament, took a toll on all of us. I don't know if we necessarily entered this year's NCAA tournament the most excited, eager, ready, happy that we could have been as a group. And the thing about the tournament, it's a 40-minute game, not a 48-minute game. It's not a 5 or 7 game series. It's 40 minutes on a neutral court. A lot of times, if you're the heavy favorite, it's not really a neutral court. It favors the underdog. And in our case, Buffalo was a very difficult matchup. Looking at Buffalo, I give them all the respect in the world. They beat us. I'm not so sure they weren't the better team. When you look at the beginning of their year all the way through the end, and this coming year, I think their team could be even better. But they had a lot of answers, and sometimes as a coach, you reflect and say, at the beginning of the year, you begin with the end in mind. What are the things you're the most concerned about that during the season we can fix, correct, and maybe prevent from being a weakness when we got to the end. We were really never able to do that with this year's team. At the beginning of the year, playing two bigs and just the defensive ability, game in, game out, we were very inconsistent. And we ran into a team that had a matchup against us and a way of playing that would have been difficult in game 1 for us, and it was equally difficult in game 35. And, there's a lot of reflecting you do when that's the case, because you start to play the what if we would have done this. But for the most part, I don't have any regrets that we worked extremely hard and did a lot of great things. But when you lose in the round 1 and you're a 4 seed, you never finish the season feeling good.
Touching on just what you said there with the excitement, maybe the excitement wasn't there, the energy. Do you think that there was something that was lost between the Pac-12 tournament and getting to that NCAA tournament bid? Because, when people look at the Pac-12 tournament, how you guys won that, there seemed like, that was just a tremendously exciting time with that one event, Lowry's dunk. You look at all the people were talking about that. Do you think there was something lost just in that small window there?
It's really hard to explain. If I had the answer, I would give it to you. You go a year earlier, we had a similar moment. If you consider that we beat Oregon and UCLA back-to-back, and who they were as teams and the players that were on both of those teams, you could have made the argument we were playing our best basketball, and it catapulted us into a Sweet 16. And you know what? We didn't play that well against Xavier, and guess what? Xavier was a year away from being a 1 seed. They probably were a lot better than the 12 seed that they had, but we lost. And that's what makes the NCAA tournament so magical, that on any given night, a team can beat any team in the tournament. And this year, when a 16 beat a 1, it's like, I can't believe that happened. It's really not that unbelievable. It will happen a lot more now moving forward, because teams like Loyola, if you look at the makeup, excellent coach, a team that was built over a 4-year window, that had great experience, that was very difficult to defend, played terrific team defense. They can make their way through to a Sweet 16 easier now than ever before, because the top teams are the youngest and most vulnerable. If DeAndre Ayton was coming back this year, we'd be a lot harder out no matter what seed we got in the NCAA tournament, because our best player would be that much more experienced. And I think that's ditto for a lot of teams in college basketball. And it's up to us to balance that by having guys like T.J. McConnell transfer in, Chase Jeter transfer in, mixing in a balanced group where you have younger freshmen becoming sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And then obviously if you have the talented star of college basketball, you want to make sure that they're the real thing and a great kid. In the last 2 years with Lowry and with DeAndre, Kobe Simmons as well. Those guys, they did a great job for us in the time that they were with us.
Are you able to talk about the guys you signed?
I am.
Just in general?
Yep. So I'll kind of just start off randomly. Justin Coleman is somebody who started his career at Alabama, and most recently is graduating from Sanford. We watched him closely and really had a hard fight to convince him to come to Arizona. He's your quintessential point guard in that he passes the ball extremely well. I think if you check the history of him as a player at Alabama against one of Oregon's best teams, I think he finished with 29 points. So he's also capable scoring and shooting, but he's older. He's somebody that is in his 5th year of college. And every person that we talked to that had coached him or been around him, the 2 words that kept popping up are high character. And I would say from a leadership perspective, even though he'll be a new player on our team, he'll give us that age and that experience that this team really needs. Omar. Omar came to us, via Europe. If you follow recently here with our program, we've had great success with both Dusan and Lowry and Keanu. The international players that have come here have done really well. I think that attracted Omar. And, Omar is one of those players that I mentioned earlier that his best days are in front of him. They're not now. His development over the next couple of years will be crucial to our program and his career. But there's a lot to work with. He loves the game. Say he's 6'5", 6'6". He's played in international competition, has a very unselfish nature to him, very good athlete, and I think there's a lot for us to work with and develop, and he'll be able to impact us on the wing at either position. Tielemans. Tielemans, and I'm about 95% there. Tielemans. Devonair Dutrieve, who was the first player to join us, and I think his family, there's always a special place for them because at that moment when our season ended, we needed that first player to say yes, and he was that guy from Los Angeles. But Devonair has a world of talent, a lot like Omar, but he progressed in his senior year of high school by leaps and bounds. And your experience as a coach is you want to continue to deal with players and coach them and recruit those that have worked for you in the past. And I would say the late bloomer tag on Devonair is the right tag. And usually when you hit your stride late, you keep improving by leaps and bounds. And I believe that will be the case with him. Who he is as a freshman, I really believe like who he is from his June coming in until the spring of his freshman year, he's going to get bigger and stronger and better. But he's a tremendous athlete, can really handle the ball, a big guard. Again, somebody who's versatile, and you don't have to pigeonhole him into one position. He can play multiple positions. And, Devonair, a lot like Omar, is not a 6'2" guard. He's 6'5", and very good athlete, but also great kid and has worked hard in his life to overcome and fight. And I think that he'll be someone who has a really outstanding career for us. So that's 3. Brandon Williams, he's the one that I think that everybody likes to talk about. We know Brandon better than everybody that we've recruited because we recruited him the longest. Feel great that he came back our way. He's a fantastic kid. Plays for a great high school coach, great high school program, Crespi in L.A., that has produced a lot of terrific players. And Brandon wasn't on the circuit before his senior year of high school. And if he was, he'd be McDonald's All-American. I don't think there are 6 guards in his class who are better than him. He's today's version of a guard in that he can both score and distribute. He's a great athlete, 6'2", very explosive, and we're thrilled to have him back. A winner as well. He's won at every level.
Just the importance of getting him back and kind of shaping the rest.
I think they're all very important. Brandon might mean more to the outside world, and he means a lot to us because he's a great player. He's a great kid, comes from a terrific family in high school, in L.A. All those things are important. But, I think that he was patient, had a relationship and a trust with our university, with our coaching staff, with our program, that really allowed him to see things through his own eyes. And but I'm excited to get him here. I really am. I guess we have 2 more that I'll address. One is Ryan Luther. And, Ryan actually showed up here today. He'll be here for summer 1. And Ryan averaged a double-double this past year until he went down with a season-ending injury. If he wouldn't have had a season-ending injury, his career would be over. But in some ways, I think both for us and him, it's nice that he still has 1 year left. But a lot like Justin Coleman, he's experienced, he's older, he's played in the ACC, he's played for 2 tremendous coaches, Kevin Stallings and Jamie Dixon. Both of those coaches rave about him as a kid and as a player. I know his family well, very similar to my relationship with T.J. McConnell and his family. Kind of grew up drinking the same water. And I know him, where he's from. I think from a physical perspective, skill, he adds to our front court. And our front court isn't maybe as deep this coming year as it's been. But with Ryan and then Chase Jeter, which I'll talk about, you have 2 players that are in their 4th and 5th year respectively in college. Both guys have played in the ACC. Both guys have played with and against great players and played for tremendous college coaches. So they're not your typical high school incoming freshmen. They're more battle-tested, which I think will balance out a lot of the change that we've had over the last year. And then, finally, Chase Jeter, which was here, he was here last year, but one of the things that I remind Chase a lot of is he played against and with DeAndre and Doosan last year every day. I don't know if Chase missed a practice. And he's worked hard to add to his body, and he's hungry to have a big role, which he's going to have, and he's hungry to play again. But Chase is he's played at the highest level. Coming out of high school, we recruited him, and we lost in that battle to Duke. And the second time around, he had equally terrific choices. We beat Gonzaga to get him maybe the second time around, but he's 6'10", and I love the way he defends. And I think that his team-centered attitude will be one of the cornerstones to our success this year. Like I mentioned it, I could talk forever, but those that are returning all have big summers in front of them. But I really believe in those that have already been a part of our program. It's hard to judge them on this past year because we were so top-heavy. I mean, Parker's experience, Raleigh and Alonzo, their experience and talent, DeAndre and Doosan, even somebody like Keanu, who's 23 years old, playing the role that he played in. It's tough to crack that group. And that doesn't mean that those guys can't come on and become all-conference players and leave Arizona and become a professional. Each of them has talent, and this is a big summer for our program. It's a big summer for the returners. But like I mentioned, as exciting as it is to be able to add that influx of talent that wasn't here last year at a desperate time, it's those that have already been a part of our program that I think will impact what we do the most. Leadership, culture, and certainly production.
As far as injuries, do you have any concerns with, I know Brandon's got like the congenital knee thing, and Chase has the bad nagging back thing. What have you seen this summer with that?
No, not really. And to answer Brandon's case, he didn't suffer an injury per se. It was like you had mentioned, it was genetic, and it was a defect that at some point was going to take him down and not allow him to be healthy. And, I credit his family. They did it at a difficult time, but they did it at a very smart time because they did not rush. He sat out. He had a great doctor, went through rehab, and inched his way back into playing. And I think we'll get him as a very healthy athlete. But, Ryan Luther's had some problems injury-wise, Chase, but one of the big parts to our success during my time at Arizona is our strength and conditioning program and our medical staff. I mean, we've had our fair share of injuries. Ray Smith comes to mind, and that will always happen. But the way we lift weights, the nutritional part, how we go about our business is always with the long term in mind. And, you can have those overuse injuries that can be negated if you just have a great trainer, team doctor, strength and conditioning coach. Chris Rounds and I, we've been together for 14 years. This will be our 15th year together. And I don't know in Division I basketball how many strength coaches and head basketball coaches have had a longer tenure than us. So he does an excellent job. And, to answer the question about this summer, strength and conditioning with so many newcomers and young players, that will be at the top of our list to make sure that those guys get bigger, stronger, and develop in a really good way.
Chase isn't feeling the back
No.
thing?
Will you be attending the NBA draft?
I'm not sure. I probably will. I'm yet to work that out with DeAndre's family and everything, but certainly would like to be there.
What will the number 2 or number 1 team get in DeAndre? And what do you think? Do you think he's going to go number 1?
Yeah, I look at the NBA as trying to figure out who they're going to pick from number 2 to 60. I think the number 1 pick's in. I would have a hard time believing, and I don't mean that in any disrespect at all. There's some players in this year's draft that are tremendous, and the NBA knows their game a lot better than a college coach. We've certainly recruited a number of the top players, but there's nobody like DeAndre. Nobody. His intelligence, his competitive spirit, his just natural athleticism. 7'1", 260 pounds, 40-plus vertical jump, unreal hands, soft touch, can play today's NBA game. I watch, Capella, the role that he's carved out with the Houston Rockets and the improvement he's made. And I think about DeAndre playing in that role on that team. And I don't know how you could ever stop them, with him in that position. So the NBA game is suited even better for him because in college, I would say 70% of the defense that he saw involved a zone, and then the 30% would have involved some form of a double team. So you're looking at 10% of the time on offense that he played where he'd have played against a traditional man-to-man. In the NBA, 85 games a year for 48 minutes, they're going to play with a court that's more spread out with no zone, and he's going to be a monster. And I know he's working hard, but there's nobody who's going to enter college basketball like him anytime soon.
You grew up a huge family game, and I know you said there's no one you've ever coached or seen that kind of, measures up to DeAndre. Is there anyone throughout basketball that he reminds you of?
You can only go on your experience as a coach. You can mention those that look like him or jump like him or kind of move like him. So I can't really answer it to that level. But, what I'll say is Lauri Markkanen is an all-rookie selection for the Chicago Bulls. And, knock on wood, if he's healthy, he's going to have an illustrious NBA career. I mean, he might play for 15 years and be an NBA All-Star. If they could do the draft over again, I don't think that he would make it to number 7. So a year later, somebody equal his size, DeAndre and him are much different. It's what's the biggest difference is just the overall size and athleticism. So I guess when you just kind of put him at a higher level than Lowry, I'm not giving Lowry any disrespect. He's tremendous, but I think DeAndre is just that type of player that you don't often see.
Going back to Brandon's recruitment, even when he did decommit, did you guys always feel like you're going to end up with him?
No. We had to recruit him all over again from start to finish. And I don't want to say rebuild our relationship because at the end, that strong connection between him and I is probably the one thing that never got divided. But it was a hard fight, and I'm glad that we won.
And 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago, you talked about TJ getting on a team and having the ability to make it in the NBA. You kind of raised our eyebrows, and you were correct. Just your thoughts on Trier and Raleigh and their chances.
I think Raleigh and Alonzo both have great chances, great. And a lot like TJ, it's tough to judge those guys on where they get picked in the draft. I mean, we hope that we have 3 players in the first round of this year's draft. That's hard to do, but it can happen. But regardless, I believe Raleigh and Alonzo really, in their own respective ways, make their way towards success in the NBA. And they do too many things well. Again, they faced a lot of zone defense. They played with 2 traditional bigs on the court at the same time. As the court opens up, in some ways the NBA game will be easier for them. And I also believe that their best days are ahead of them. They'll both add to what they do well. And both guys have played in highly competitive environments, won a lot of games. In Alonzo's case, I can remember as far back as Team USA. I mean, the team that we won the gold medal that he was a part of, Jalen Brunson, Thomas Welsh, Caleb Swanigan, Nanu Onuaku, Josh Jackson, Jason Tatum, Harry Giles, Terrence Ferguson. I mean, he was one of them. And his career speaks for itself. Ditto for Raleigh. And Raleigh, it's very hard to judge this year because he missed so much. And although he had a very good season, I think he could have had a great season, and some of that will really show itself out this summer and spring when he's healthy and they really can compare his ability to others. I think he will be he'll be an NBA player for a long time, and I believe the same thing for Alonzo.
When in the course of talking to recruits and their families, did the FBI investigation come up, and if so, what did you say to them about it?
I'm not going to speak on that.
Given everything that's happened around the program lately, how do you feel about the state of Arizona basketball in general?
I feel good. I'm very much looking forward to the future. You got that third question?
Yeah, different subject. DeAndre's defense is something that a lot of scouts have or amateur scouts or professional scouts have kind of talked about. How do you think he can grow defensively? Can he become, the type of player who can stay on the court at all times and become a really good defender in the NBA?
Yeah, I think anybody that criticizes his defense doesn't know the game. And I say that again with all due respect. There's a lot of people who talk in the newspaper who are experts via the NBA that don't know what they're doing. DeAndre played the 4 for us this year. He played 0 zone defense. It's something that you can criticize me as a coach for not doing more of, but for the development of the actual player, there'll be no surprises when he enters the NBA, because how he practiced 105 times and how he played in all 35 games for us, he played man-to-man, and he guarded a face-up player. He switched ball screens at 7'1". He guarded three-point shooters. He played pick-and-roll defense. He played transition defense. He guarded every type of player that he will see in the NBA. In the NBA, they'll be better, but in college, a senior 6'5", great three-point shooter is very difficult to defend. He played, and he did it exceptionally well. I've never seen a big guy, ever. A lot of the players that I've coached at USA Basketball included, that moves quicker and has a better command 20 to 30 feet away from the basket than DeAndre Ayton. Jahlil Okafor played a lot of zone in college, and they had great success. Got to the NBA, and maybe it's one of the things that he struggled with early in his career, and maybe he'll pick up on it. You can't ever say that DeAndre Ayton doesn't play defense, because it might be his greatest strength. If you talk about his shot blocking ability, you also have to take into consideration he played very few possessions at center. So most of the time when you're judging him as a defender, like Lauri Markkanen, he's 30 feet from the basket. He's 20 feet from the basket. Judge him on his defensive rebounding, it didn't matter. He's the best of the best. But he's not going to block shots at the level that he could have if we would have just put him around the rim in a zone, or for that matter, let him play center game in, game out. You would have talked about his shot blocking prowess. But what you wouldn't have seen is how quick and how smart he was away from the rim. His defense won't be a weakness for him. It'll be an absolute strength. And I think anybody that would look at it in the other lens, they didn't watch us play.
Is that something that's been a question, when guys come to you, scouts and execs for teams, and they say, all right, DeAndre looks great, but what about his defense? That's something you've gotten a bunch recently?
You have to pick something negative. It's not going to all be positive. What is the thing he can get better at? And you'd say, well, he didn't block a lot of shots, and maybe Arizona's defense this past year wasn't as strong. I mean, he was on the all-defensive team. I didn't have a vote. The other 11 coaches voted him on the all-defensive team. So I think that when he shows up at the next level, his intelligence, his quickness, and what he did in his year with us, you'll see it right away that that's not going to be an Achilles heel for him. As a matter of fact, I think it'll be an overall strength. The Phoenix Suns coach will love how he plays defense, because you're going to be able to move him around and allow him to guard a variety of types of players because, like I said, of his athleticism and his mindset. Plus, he's a great competitor. When you give him a challenge, he rises and meets that challenge. Same thing with him as a person. I've never been around anybody better. And he's a guy that does what he's told, sacrifices, loves to win, played through tremendous adversity at times, has overcome a lot in his life. And I'm excited for all of our guys that are in this year's draft, but really excited for him. His day, this has been a long time coming for him and his family.
And Sean, from an offensive standpoint with DeAndre, what do you say to people that contend that he'll get lost offensively in a league that's become three-point centric? And is that because maybe that a lot of those teams don't have a quality big man that they can utilize at the offense?
No, look, his offense, you can play him anywhere. I mean, you could play him at center, and if you watch the last couple of weeks of the NBA, and just whoever that center is, take him off the court and just put DeAndre in that uniform, I think he'd get 20 points. I just believe that. If you want to play him with another big, he certainly can do that for portions of the game. But the way today's NBA game is moving, it favors somebody like DeAndre because he's so agile, and it's such a full court game, and so much space on the court that somebody like him is, unguardable Lowry, in a different way, is the same, and I think that's what the NBA saw. They underestimated how physical and strong he was. You know, the knock on him at this time a year ago was that he didn't mix it up around the rim and didn't seem to be as adept close, but that was what he was working to become better at. What he had down pat was his ability to shoot the three, and you put him in an NBA game, I think you saw his weakness improve and his strength obviously become a great strength at that level. Ditto for DeAndre. Whatever his strengths are, he'll bring to the NBA, and I think whatever those perceived weaknesses are, he'll address right away.
Coach, you've had incredible depth in the front court with Bristich, Tarzinski, Anderson. It's a little less in depth, I'm sorry, lack of words, but are you transitioning to more of a guard-centric offense just with the lack of that depth there?
We are. I think a lot of the lessons that I have learned is first of all, it's very difficult to recruit bigs. You know, there aren't as many of them. They're coveted. Many of them, if they're talented, don't stay in college for a long time, and they're very important. But you know, I think the way of playing moving forward for us is to have more wings and guards on the court at the same time, and have more spacing and quick movement. That doesn't mean that a lot of the things that we've done, like rebounding, it's not a fun thing to talk about it, but it's the thing we've done the best over the 9 years that I've been here. It wins a lot of games. So as you play with more skill and the ball moves and it's spread out a little bit more, we can't lose that second part, the rebounding. But yes, to answer your question, and we are not as deep, but I look at Emmanuel Acott as kind of that new wave wing player. You know, like a Solomon Hill, like a Rondé Hollis Jefferson, if Stanley Johnson was in our program this coming year, where you could play them at the four. And I think E-Man, especially in his second year as he's bigger and stronger, we'll look to move him around and bounce him back and forth. So when you look at our front court, Chase Jeter, Ryan Luther, Ira Lee, I think we'll have a great summer. And then Emmanuel, and then whoever we can maybe add. That would be our front court for sure. But you're right, and that's been a luxury of the last 3 or 4 teams that we've had. We've had great depth. When you think of Chance Comanche, Chance will be an NBA player, and you know he was a guy that played alongside some terrific guys. But you know, Chance at 6'11" was a terrific college guy and bright future ahead of him.
Sorry, the kids must have embraced that. The going to smaller, maybe possibly going faster.
We had already moved in that direction in September and October. If you looked at kind of who we were recruiting and who that class was headed towards being, that decision was made. And then this spring we just picked right up where we left off in that thought process. But you always look at what you've done well and what you can do better. And I think part of when you get to the NCAA tournament, having more shot makers, more ball handlers, more players that at the end of the clock can go get their own shot. That's something that I think wins out, something that Villanova, for example, thrived with in the last several NCAA tournaments. And I think building a roster towards that is something that we want to move towards.
Do you see it similar to 93, 94 here when Newt went with the guards and Damon and played?
Damon talked to me a lot about that, the change there. But, that's what you do as a coach. I mean, you take inventory of how the game's changing, and it's changing. What are the things maybe that you can do better, that you can control, and then you try to take advantage and make those changes. By the same token, you can't panic when you're 32-4 or 5, and you lose by 2 points in a round of a Sweet 16 and say, let's do everything different. Because I think if you look at that record in that season 2 years ago, that's one that a lot of programs would love to have, including us. So it's that balancing act of recognizing what you do well and not panicking, and recognizing maybe some things that you can do better that you can implement. And that's what we try to do here every day.
What do you expect in the Pac-12 this year? I know it's so early and teams might have not finalized the rosters yet, but I mean, how do you expect this league to fare top to bottom? Do you see it being deeper than last year possibly?
I don't really know. I mean, yesterday Reed Travis leaving, I feel bad for Stanford. They invested a lot in Reed. He was one of our conference's great players this past year. So that happened at the end of May. It's the world we live in. Wherever Reed goes to college, it's on June 1. They've got themselves a heck of a basketball player. I'm sure their program changes for the better. So it's not as clear cut each year now, but I think Oregon will be terrific. I think UCLA, those two in particular, and then you have a number of other programs that are replacing a lot or trying to have those players return that much better. One thing that our conference has going for us, I think a couple things, one is the leadership. Jamie Zanenovich, who's taken a leadership role on the men's basketball side, I think has great expertise and experience. We felt that in our league meetings this spring, where they're hard at work at trying to make sure that how we schedule, who we schedule in our non-conference, how we can grow our conference, what we can do better to get the most teams in postseason. He's at the forefront of that leadership, and he's hard at work in the off season, and I think that makes all of us feel good. I think the second part, there's no denying the NBA success of the Pac-12. I mean, last year Markelle Fultz was the number one pick in the NBA draft. This year DeAndre Ayton will be the number one pick in the NBA draft. We've had lottery picks. We've had depth in the first and second rounds. There's no conference that's doing it any better than us when you consider that we have only 12 programs in our conference, not 16. And that's an important aspect of recruiting in the future. It's never been healthier. I think our conference continues to produce great talent. And I think it's those two things there that have us the most excited and positioned well.
And I don't know if you've seen this or not, but Conference USA is kind of doing a round robin thing this year where they're going to do half the season and then kind of reseeding it based on how the teams are faring, so that the two top teams will play each other more. Would you like to see something like that out here possibly, and what kind of potential do you think that kind of
We're talking as a conference about a lot of things, scheduling, but the fact that we're talking about a lot of things in the month is May and June is great. It hasn't always been like that, but I think since Jamie's taken the leadership role that he has, and all of us trying to, I think, look after each other. The days of cheering against each other within a conference are over. We want programs that are healthy. We want the bottom of our conference to win the most games possible in non-conference. We want the most teams we can get into the NCAA tournament. Once we're in the NCAA tournament, we want those teams to advance. This year that didn't happen, and we were a big part of that problem. When you have a 4 seed, you want to win a few games, and the fact that we didn't do that isn't something that we feel good about. But, USC, having them left out, not that we needed a wake-up call, but it makes everybody in our conference step back. For them to win 11 games away from home, finish in second place, get to the conference tournament's championship game, have the talent that they've had and had a year ago and not make the tournament, we don't want that to happen. We want that team to get in. So I think we're hard at work to try to look after each other, and we've been very productive with a lot of things over the last couple of months.
Do the league meetings feel like after this year where the Pac-12, like in football, goes 1-7 in bowls and then no one goes past first round in the tournament, did it feel like that where teams are coming together and really trying to fix stuff as in previous years, maybe smaller improvements?
No, it's cyclical. I mean, 2 years ago, 3 years from now, I can remember a few years back. I mean, we don't talk a lot about this, but we actually had 7 teams in the NCAA tournament, 7 of 12. And I believe we had 3 others, at least 2 in the NIT. So you're talking about 9 or 10 of the 12 teams in postseason. In that respective year, we didn't advance in the tournament, so we weren't able to catch that momentum that oftentimes you do. But there's been a lot of new hires, I know, on the football side, and the sky's the limit on how good we can be. I think it's just an overall investment in quest to make sure that we're getting better and that we're aware of the changing landscape around college basketball. When my brother's the coach at Indiana, they're going to play a 20-game schedule. It's not like everybody in the Big Ten's excited about that. They're worried that maybe they overschedule, and how are they going to reboot their non-conference schedule knowing that they play 2 extra games. By the way, some of those games are going to happen earlier, so if you have a younger team, it's not going to favor the younger team, it's going to favor the older team. So we're aware as a conference of all those changes, and we're hard at work at communicating. And an example of our conference's growth on the basketball side is Las Vegas. I mean, if you've been at the Pac-12 tournament the last couple of years and you see T-Mobile Arena sold out and the quality of players and teams that have been in the semifinals, and then you think back to maybe the Pac-10 tournament or the Pac-12 tournament in LA a decade ago, it's amazing the growth. And that's what we want to do, and we're hard at work at making sure that we're looking at those types of things.
You talk about overscheduling. You want to go to 22 for Pac-12 so you play everyone twice and don't do the miss UCLA once a year type of thing?
I don't believe 22 will ever happen. 20 could, but we're looking at the pluses and minuses of it. And there's a lot that's being talked about. No decisions have been made. And, Dave and the athletic directors, they're equally hard at work at trying to figure out where the future of college basketball will be in 5 years. You can't judge it by 5 or 10 years ago. And nobody has more respect for the past at Arizona than me. But, if Coach Olson were here today, and he would be trying to figure out his non-conference scheduling model, and he always played a tremendous non-conference schedule, he might not be scheduling now like he would then, only because teams like North Carolina, Syracuse, Duke, they're not going to come to McHale to play a home and away series. The ACC and the Big Ten, they already have 2 or 3 non-conference games built in before the year begins, right? The Big Ten ACC Challenge. In my brother's case, Indiana is going to play in Conseco Fieldhouse against Butler, Notre Dame. That's 2. Going to have to play somebody in state. That's 3. Then all of a sudden you have the Gavitt games, Big Ten, Big East. That's 4. So they're not looking to add home and away non-conference games. So for us, what does that mean? How do we go about, some of our recent neutral site games, playing at Texas A&M on a neutral court. But this year we play Baylor at home, at UConn, at Alabama. We still want to play those home and away series. They're just that much more difficult to get. So with that, maybe playing a Pac-12 game prior to Christmas is the smart thing for our fans. I know that's things that we're talking about. We're working with television on that. But I'll end with how I began. What's exciting is that we're talking about these things in the months of May and June as a conference. And as a conference, we're trying to get better as a basketball conference. Maybe at the very beginning when I was here, May and June, you didn't talk a lot about the future. Now we are, and that's exciting because we'll get it right. A lot like the Pac-12 tournament, moving to T-Mobile in Vegas, in the benefits that everybody has felt. There's some decisions I think we'll make right now that will benefit the Pac-12 for years to come.
In terms of non-conference scheduling, I think about this time last year, you announced the home and home with Alabama. Are there any last-minute things you think are going to be added to the 18-19 schedule, and maybe restarting that Gonzaga series or something like that?
Well, this year, first of all, keep in mind we're in Maui. In the field of 8 teams, it no longer has Chaminade. I don't know if you realize that. So it's the strongest field that's ever been in Maui. Duke, Gonzaga, Xavier, Illinois, Iowa State, Auburn, San Diego State, Arizona. So 3 games and 3 nights. Maui has been a staple for our fans and program for many, many years. That will continue. So those are 3 games right there. Baylor at home, at UConn, at Alabama. Again, I think when you add those up and you start to look, and also consider this, that the most important thing in non-conference scheduling is, and again, I go back to kind of maybe how things would have been a decade ago, even when I was at Xavier, it was so easy to project who would return a year from now, sometimes 2 years from now. So everybody was more eager and apt to build their non-conference schedule a couple of years out. Now, on May 31st, we had a first-team all-conference player, Reed Travis, leave, and will be eligible at the next program right away. That affected a lot, and that happened, at the end of May. So I think the balancing act is, considering the change that you have from one year to the next, we've had a lot. We're going to lose a lot of firepower from last year's team. And I think to have a balance of schedule that meets this team, you play through injuries, like, for example, Raleigh. You don't want to get blown out non-conference. You want to bring as many wins to the table as you can. So you have to factor all those things in as well. And that's what we do here really every day.
What's Austin Carroll's role going to be
Austin Carroll will shift back to his original role in early September a year ago, and he's a coach in waiting. I could see Austin move on a year from now, have an opportunity to be a Division I assistant and be a great coach, a lot like Danny Peters has done, and some of the other people. Ben Tucker's done it, and now he works for Joe Pasternak. So some of those other coaches, the route that they've gone, I think Austin will go that same route. We're very fortunate to have him return.
Was there anything that surprised you about him kind of and what he did in his role last year?
No, we threw him to the fire, but he was ready. And I think that tells you that he'll be ready for his next opportunity. And that next opportunity could be here as well. All right. Thank you.